Okay. Ooh, that feels better. All right. We have folks out on Zoom, so we need to use microphone for them. So good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Nick Fisicelli with Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park. Schoodic Institute's a nonprofit science and education organization, and together with our National Park Service colleagues, we co-lead this research learning center. This is one of about 17 research learning centers across the national park system. So this is tonight's our second installment of our 2023 Acadia Science Symposium. Hopefully last week you caught the first session, which was lightning talks from our early career folks. What drives early career environmental science professionals? And if you missed it, this will be posted on the Schoodic Institute YouTube page. Hopefully you know there's a Schoodic Institute YouTube page. I checked today, we have 165 videos on our YouTube page. So when you're tired of Netflix and Disney Plus and whatever else you have a subscription to, please do check out our YouTube page. If you just Google YouTube Schoodic Institute, it will come up. And so our talk from last week will be posted soon once our IT staff are back in the office. All right, and tomorrow is sort of the main event, so to speak. It's the full day science symposium, which will be both in person and virtual. Hopefully you already signed up for that, and we'll get to see you tomorrow. So I do want to, again, thank you for joining us tonight. I need to thank our corporate sponsors for this event as well. Darling Chevrolet, Bar Harbor Bank and Trust, and Wallace Events. All right, I'm going to let Bill and Mike introduce themselves. They'll do a much better job of that than I can, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about their local experience here with community science. And I know that visits out to visit Bill and Mike at the Shellfish Resilience Lab and the other interns and volunteers out there, it's a highlight for a lot of people that come out to Schoodic Institute every year. We have a lot of citizen science teams that come out here, and these are people ages 15 to 85, and people from across the country and even across the world as well. We have some international teams, and almost invariably their favorite or one of their favorite experiences is meeting with Mike and Bill and others at the Shellfish Resilience Lab and seeing what's happening here locally. And so we wanted to share their work and have them share their stories and the efforts that they're doing here in Gouldsboro with a broader audience. So please join me in welcoming them up here to the stage.
The picture that you see there is Bunkers Harbor down the road. As you leave the park, you kind of go by this. I'm going to start out by just saying that our goal tonight is not so much to talk to you about clams and all of the stuff that we do. What we really want to talk about is how it is that we ended up over the last 6 years figuring out how to get people involved in sort of thinking about tough problems. The Gouldsboro, like any coastal community, is dealing with a whole lot of change, both demographic changes and climate changes and all sorts of things like that. And for the last 6 years or so, Mike and I have been particularly working with the Shellfish Committee to get them involved in that in a way that works. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll find out, but we're going to share about 6 or 7 cases with you. And so this is going to be kind of a case study thing. We'll be asking you to think with us about some of these things that we've seen happen. So we'll get there with that. But first, I think we should introduce ourselves. My name's Bill. Started out as a school teacher. left teaching school to fix trucks for about 4 or 5 years, which, go figure. And then got back and worked on computing with computers for about 20 some years. Came here, joined Zoellick Institute when it was in its very first early days, when this building wasn't here, none of this was here, and worked mostly with teachers across the state of Maine with the Zoellick Institute to try to get teachers and kids involved in doing science that mattered and that they cared about. And some of this. My focus was in particular working with kids who didn't really fit into the normal. So it wasn't like working with kids who are going to be science hotshots. It was working with kids who didn't see themselves as doing science, and one of the goals was to get them thinking that they can. So that's how I met Mike. We'll get to that.
As Bill said, my name is Mike. I was a Marine Patrol officer for the state of Maine for over 33 years, 28 years of which was covering the town of Gooseboro and the surrounding towns. I retired in 2013. 2014, they recruited me to be the shellfish warden. And in the time that I was the patrol officer for this area, I was on the school board 17 years. I was the chairman of 14 years. And when I found out that Bill was doing work with local students, and I don't know that Bill and I really know how we got hooked up, but education was very important to me, and I wanted to involve young people. So then Bill and I connected, and we've grown to what we're doing today and some of the things that you're going to hear there tonight.
So that's us. Before we jump into this, I want to find out something. It looks like we've got different kinds of folks. I see a couple that I know. Hello, Sarah. Glad you're here. And what I'd like to start out doing is just start asking you a couple questions, a show of hands sorts of questions. So how many of you here think of what you do primarily as being about science? Just raise hands. Okay. How many of you think of yourselves as being primarily about that your job, what you do, is mostly about communication? Okay. And how many of you, was that a tough call because you thought maybe you'd do both? Yeah, okay. How many of you have had any experience at all work in your professional work or in your retired work, however it might be? How many of you end up working with communities? This is the main thing. Okay. All right. Keep your hands up. If you're working with communities, keep your hands up if your work is more focused on helping them rather than doing that. Because scientists do both. We have scientists that mostly they got work to do and they work with communities to help them, mostly about them. Then we'll have folks that are really, and you'll meet some of them on the screen tonight, who really are working to do something with the community. Okay. Okay. Last one. Raise your hand if you found working with communities and getting communities on board to be difficult, frustrating, and unexpectedly something challenging. Me for sure. Okay. All right. Those of you that raised your hand, and even those that you didn't, if you have a few moments while we're talking right now, just take a couple moments and write down some of the things that have been particularly challenging or disappointing. Sometimes it's disappointing, frustrating, because when we're done talking, we're going to spend minutes, about maybe 15, 20, hearing from you. And I'd like to this is case studies we're doing tonight. Some of you might have case studies that we can throw out on the floor. So think about that. You've got about 45 minutes or so to think about that. But we will want to hear from you about what you've been doing, but in the context of some of the things that we talk about tonight. So Mike and I ran into each other, as Mike said, around kids, and that turned pretty quickly into something that a lot of people, how many of you are from Gouldsboro, around Gouldsboro, know something about Gouldsboro? Okay, it's okay. So if you're not from Gouldsboro, this won't mean anything to you, but folks around here know a lot about the work we've done with the Shellfish Lab, with clams and clam fishermen. So normally we talk a lot about that. We've done whole presentations about all of the stuff going on at the Shellfish Lab. This isn't one of them. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I don't have to repeat everything, right? Okay. All right. So I'll hold it out here. Normally we spend a lot of time talking about the Shellfish Lab. I'm going to advance a couple slides. This is what I want to do is, rather than us telling you a lot about the Shellfish Lab and talking about that, I think I would like to just show a brief video. It was done a few years ago. It will give you a picture, a snapshot of how it is. The audience, go in the video. So we'll go with that. And Sarah routinely knows how to do this. So Mike and I will just sit down.
This project just blossomed as a result of the need for shellfish revitalization in the community. I've been in enforcement all my life. I'm on my 42nd year and I didn't know anything about this. But I like a challenge, and this is certainly a challenge.
Softshell clam populations are declining in Maine because of predation. Towns have been sort of reseeding flats, which means they've been placing small seed clams, which are about the width of your pinky or the size of a small grape, out under nets, just trying to sort of increase the population of clams that's available to clammers and to sort of protect them from predators to a degree.
Gouldsboro has 55 miles of shoreline. It's got enormous variety in terms of the ways that the water meets the land. There's Grand Marsh Bay, which is this enormous salt marsh. There's open ocean, and managing that really requires that you know the place.
We started this project with students working out in the mudflats for the clammers, and so they actually did research in the mudflats to help the town determine which particular mudflats might be appropriate or might be best for reseeding, for restoration efforts to keep the wild fishery going.
The program we've worked with at Sumner High School is called the Pathways Program, and they're typically kids who are better at learning by doing, better being involved in a project that has a useful outcome. We did experiments that by putting essentially a flower pot into the mud with a screening over it, putting lots of them in, 36 of them in at a site, high tide, mid tide, low tide, put a dozen clams in each of those flower pots and set them out in the spring and then pull them back in the fall, and that would allow us to look at how much growth we got. And the students did all the measuring.
So you can measure from the length and the width to find out how much they've grown from the original seed clam size up to where they are now. We could figure out what exactly was killing the clams and how many had survived in each location.
I had a different project than Alex. I was researching the green crab, one of the very invasive crabs in Maine here. It helped me show the people that brought me out onto the mudflats what I actually have to help them, and schoolwork isn't the only thing that I can show you I can do.
With the data, we put it all together just in a presentation style form so that we could present it to the school board, we could present it to the Shellfish Committee for Gouldsboro, and we used that data to figure out what location we really want to put all these different seed clams in. This data is being used for a lot of real things that wouldn't have ever happened if it weren't for Pathways helping out.
We recognized pretty soon that what we needed to have was a lot more young clams, 1-year-old clams, to put out on the flats.
Down East Institute obviously has been a real good source for our local communities to buy seed clams. We could buy 100,000 a year or something like that, and that really wasn't going to replenish the flat. So we started spitballing ideas around about what it would take for us to be able to buy clams cheaper, because Kyle told us that we could buy smaller clams cheaper, and what it would take for us to be able to raise our own clams to seed the flats at a cheaper price.
Mike says, so I have a crazy idea, and the crazy idea was, could we actually maybe do this on our own, what DEI is doing in a big facility. And
so it kind of spawned this idea, I guess.
when the clams are spawned in one spring, it's pretty easy to grow them out over the summer. The problem is keeping them alive over the winter. You really can't put them in the mud after that first summer. Survival would be pretty bad. The question was not, first off, can we do it? Because we're pretty sure that we could keep them over the winter. The key question was, can we do it economically?
As we were sort of starting to figure out how we were going to build these upwellers or these nursery trays and how we were really going to get this lab up and running technically, I had the opportunity to go down to Jonesport Beals and visit the Down East Institute. We were super fortunate to have Kyle Pepperman give us a full-scale tour of the nursery, the hatchery, and their facilities, which are pretty incredible. And they have given us the opportunity to really learn about how these things work and how they're built.
So what you have here is we have our nursery trays. We figure there's approximately 105,000 in those 10 trays. Next year, hopefully we'll get the students and be able to find a couple students that will help us put them in, make some measurements, and so that we can graph the growth in here compared to the growth in the upweller inside.
Not only is the lab itself experimental, but we can bring in learners and we can bring in early career scientists and say, this is really what science is about. We don't know the answers. And we've been afforded this opportunity by really generous funders and by the Down East Institute to take this project on, not only for the town of Gouldsboro, but as a model for other towns.
Other municipalities keep asking us about whether it's going to work or not. And I hope that if it does, that I hope other municipalities get an opportunity to find a location like this. We were very fortunate that Dana Rice allowed us to put this in. I mean, it's going to be a great asset to the community and a great asset to the school to be able to have this opportunity to have the students here and work, and it'll benefit the clamming in town.
For me individually, I've really struggled with academics and just having the confidence to go through with projects like this, because I've never been sure about being able to do it. But through this project, I really figured out that I'm good with data, I'm good with math, and I have the ability to do the presentations that I didn't think I could. So there was a lot of helping the community with this, but this helped me a lot personally as well.
I can't say this enough. If we were not all cooperating and using the skills that we have and brought them to the table, none of this would be as successful as it is right now. I mean, I just get excited when I think about the partners. I say the partners in crime that I have, because we are a good group. And I'm excited to see this work. Very excited.
So like I said, a lot of it was about kids, and but also a lot of it turned out very much about trying to work with the community with the shellfish lab. So I'll just say real quickly, some of the things that we talked about in that film didn't work out as planned. Nursery trays turned out to be sort of crab nursery trays rather than clam nursery trays. I think we murdered a whole lot of innocent clams in those nursery trays. We moved on to upwellers. We have given whole presentations about our problems with pumps. We don't want to hear about that, but other people do. So, and that we are now to the point where it's actually working. We've got good flow. We've really cut the amount of electricity we're using by a third. All sorts of good things, but that's for another presentation. What I want to talk about for this presentation, as I said, is more about how it is that we work with the committee to get them from being in not such a great place and not working that well with each other to a place where they really were making use of science and data and where they're a team. And it took us a while, so we'll get there. But before I do that, I think about this with a kind of a, there's a framework that I'm using, and I'll step back so I can see it. So for those of you that are scientists and for those of you that aren't, it's not weird to think about the fact that stuff happens because of a system behind it. So you've got effects, and a lot of times we focus on the effects. Oh man, you don't see that many clams anymore. It's really hard to find clams anywhere but up high. But behind those effects, there's arrangements. And in this case, with the clams, the arrangements are, very briefly, that because we don't have as cold a winter, there's more crabs that are surviving, and that they eat a lot more clams, and then there's other knock-on effects. They destroy shore, and it just goes on and on. So that's not news to anybody that does science. That's just basic ecology, really. What's interesting, this little note on the bottom of Design Studio for Social Intervention, they woke me up to the idea that if you got systems that are made by people, there's another dimension to this, and that dimension is that you've got ideas and beliefs, and those ideas and beliefs actually structure the arrangements. So as a simple example, our ideas and beliefs about what should be happening with kids as they learn, those end up getting structured in the way a school day works, how school works. So the arrangements of school reflect a certain set of ideas. As we're sitting here in this room, I'm in front, Mike's in front, we get to talk, and you don't. And so there's a certain set of ideas, and those arrangements are coming from a set of perceptions, and on and on and on. So that's a big deal, and it's what I want to draw your attention to again and again in these cases. Is that we'll see something that's going on. We'd like to change it, but we don't change it by just trying to attack the effect. We got to look at what's behind there, what arrangements are going on in the community, in the committee, and so on. I throw the word data up here to remind me that for those of you that are scientists, well, the thing that is missing in this diagram is like, well, yeah, that's fine, ideas and beliefs and arrangements, but where does data and where does scientific information come into the picture? Yes, sir. Okay, and then the people in the room, I got to find a mid spot. Okay, how's this? Okay, we'll try. So the data, I thought a lot about this because this is sort of what, in my retirement, this is what I do. This guy's still working, that's what he does. We're just working a lot with communities. We're trying to bring data. And I would sort of, what happens is if the data is accepted, if the data is about something that is kind of already sort of bought in. I'll give you an example. There are no fishermen, there are no clam harvesters that do not know or who don't believe that the Gulf of Maine is getting warmer. So if we have data about that, then it's just a measurement. It gives us a way of quantifying that, but everybody knows it's true, so there's no debate about that. But if anybody has worked with a group of fishermen, at times, or really other folks, you'll find that there's not everything is so cut and dried. I'll show you a little bit later, we'll talk about a big report that folks did for Gouldsboro that talks about the effects that we're likely to see over the next 15, 20 years with regard to sea level rise and storms. And when we presented that report at a group, people asked, well, how do they know that? Are they sure? Is it really going to be? And that means that it's kind of, well, now we're more in the realm of ideas. That's something that's still contested. It's got to be worked through. So I guess what I'm saying is when we're doing science work, it can either kind of come across as something that's just, yeah, sure, it's that big, oh, okay. Or it can come across as something that you've got to work on, where it's going to take some time. And that's part of actually what this is all about. Okay, so I'm going to give our first case study now. So here's, this is a real story. The real story is that this was actually happened in a gymnasium in Gouldsboro. So picture gymnasium, picture wooden floors. There was a screen. The scientist was up front, and he was talking to a group of guys that actually were wearing hats and stuff. They weren't, as I said, there weren't any cushions. The chairs were really hard, so that wasn't so good. But the case was that he presented a bunch of data about that he'd collected. He'd done a bunch of sampling, and I think that it was up in Goldsboro. I think it was up sort of West Goldsboro area. I could be wrong. But the key thing is that he showed pictures, graphs, talked about what he'd gotten. And mostly what he said is, I didn't find much. There weren't a lot of clams. It seemed there was a lot of predation. And so he went through his presentation, showed them maps where he'd done the work. And then at the end, he says, stopped, like this again, this is the normal arrangement. You sort of say, well, does anybody have any questions? And one of the harvesters asked him to back up a couple slides to a certain particular place where he'd been sampling to look at that map. And the harvester took a moment or two, stared at the map, and sort of said, so did you sample anywhere a little north of there? And the scientist / speaker said, no, I didn't. They only sampled in the places that are shown on the graph. And that was the end. There were no other questions, and so that was the end of the presentation. So I'm going to stop now, and for the Zoom audience, I'm going to ask, I'll repeat whatever it is that you say, but just thinking about what I just said, what do you think would happen there or didn't happen in that meeting? Yeah. So, right, so the answer, the fellow from the audience here sort of said, the scientist did not ask the guy who asked the question, so why do you have that question? Does anybody have anything to add on to that, or maybe think about why that might have happened, what it might have been in the, I mean, I know the scientist, he's a great guy, so what was it that might be in the arrangements that had to do with that? Someone else, adding on to what he said. Yes. So just repeating what you said, this person sort of said, he could have asked for them to talk about it before. Absolutely right. It could have been something where they had a conversation rather than just a presentation. What else might have been going on in the room there that was happening, the arrangement sort of thing? Yeah. Right. So this person said, adding on, said sort of, you got somebody in the front of the room, he owns the space, and there's no give and take. And this kind of, I mean, honestly, when I give presentations, I have probably had people ask questions and wish, gee, I wish they hadn't asked that question. And kind of, can I get out of here? You know, I'm done. So maybe some of that was going on. One more. What do you think was the effect of what the scientists did? Yeah. Something you said? So this remark was, the scientist is set up at the front of the room as the expert, completely ignoring that the people in the chairs are experts, and certainly chairs, they have local expertise that this guy doesn't have, for sure. What do you suppose, let's go to this, so we have this effect, the scientist, he didn't ask the fellow, well, what do you know that I don't know, or why did you ask the question? What do you suppose was the effect of that in terms of what the scientist was trying to do? Yes. So I'll repeat some of that. It was a lot there, but so when you don't
involve the people in the conversation with you, if you're not essentially showing any curiosity about what they might know or engaging them, then it turns out that they're less involved in hearing what you had to say. Is that, did I got it sort of right? So, yeah, yeah. Right. So another possibility is that the outcome was, that guy has no idea what he's talking about, which might have been true, but it also might have been that he did have something to say that he just kind of got washed away in the storm there, sort of. It just was suddenly, whatever he was trying to do was gone. I'm here to tell you that what Abe said is what happened. Talking with the guys afterwards, they were done. They were done. It's just, why are we here? This is stupid. Why are we listening to him? Which is, you know, if you're trying to communicate science to people, that's not the outcome that you want. And I think anyone that if you have people in the audience who are working with fishermen and whatnot, you won't be surprised if you run into that. Okay, so that's our case. Now, we're going to do this sort of with things. Oh, this really happened. We're going to wind back a little bit, talk about the Shellfish Committee, but what I really want to give you some sense is how it is that you do this over time to actually have something good happen. I think, way to start, that's the same. Case number one, who owns the Shellfish Committee? And I'm going to sit in the audience and watch Mike talk about this.
So with that question, who owns the shellfish? Who's got the most to gain from the shellfish being improved on the flats? The commercial harvester? Recreational harvester? You can buy a recreational license in the town of Gooseboro and you can go dig your own peck of clams. So there's a lot to lose and a lot to gain. So what happened is we planted some clams as a result of the plant pot work that was done by the students in a particular location. Growth rate was phenomenal. First year, taking a clam that was, probably 3 or 4 millimeters up to 1.5 inches in one summer. That doesn't happen every year. But with that growth rate, you're projecting clams have to be 2 inches in longest diameter to be harvestable and to be sold legally. So we had 65 nets. Net is 13 by 13. And we had over 100,000 clams in the flats. Planted the clams, took the nets off, sampled the area. The area was checked. We do a sample, a core sample, and check the area to see a percentage of clams. Then it was brought back to the harvesters of whether we dig the area or not. There was a lot of discussion about whether we harvest the clams. Kyle from Down East Institute said that you want to harvest the clams, that the large percentage of them were legal. And you just figure out how many you would take. So there was a lot of discussion at this meeting about whether we harvest the clams or not. And we talk about clam spat. And that's when a clam spawns. The spawn floats through the water column for about 21 days and then it settles out. And that's how you get your baby clams. They'll settle on the flats against a rock or wherever, and they'll grow. The discussion was by Heidi, who was the area biologist, and by Kyle Pepperman, who's the scientist at Down East Institute, that we should harvest those clams. Because the #1 predator on the flats used to be man. Now it's the Asian green crab, your Asian green crab. So a discussion took place, and it was decided that they would leave those clams in the flats to spawn. Anybody got any idea what happened? The green crabs had a feast. We went back and we checked it, and you couldn't see the green, couldn't see very many clams at all. And this discussion has come up on several occasions about what they should have done. And there are folks that still say that we should have left the clams, we did the right thing by leaving the clams, and that netting clams is a waste of time. We already proved that by netting the clams, they were allowed to grow to a harvestable size, but they didn't want to harvest them. Yep. Yes, when I first started, of course, I wasn't very welcomed as the shellfish warden because I had been dealing with these people for the last 28 years. And it wasn't always in a bad situation, but I was the man. I was the guy with the gun and the badge, and I made sure that they did things right. Tagged the clams, didn't take short clams, all those things. When I walked in, they didn't want me there, first off, and then it was the wild, wild west at the first few meetings that I went to. It was very disorganized. People didn't trust each other. The diggers did not trust each other. They wouldn't communicate. They didn't respect each other. And as we progressed and things went on, Bill started coming to the meetings, and Pauline and other folks. And Heidi Layton, who's the area biologist, was coming to the meetings as well. And the meetings became a lot more civil and a lot more respectful. It did not happen easily. It was a struggle. First off, we had a couple folks that thought that I was the chairman of the committee and I was running the committee. I can't be the chairman of the committee. All I was doing was helping facilitate it. I had a little bit of experience being the chairman of the school board on how a meeting should run and trying to bring a little order and decorum to that meeting. And after a while, it did happen slowly. And some individuals still resented me and were still having a hard time thinking that I was running the meetings. But it's elected by a chair. There's 5 members on the committee, and they're elected by the group of harvesters that make up the shellfish diggers. And that changes, it can change every year.
I don't stand up so well, so I'm going to sit down sometimes. We had an event where, at one point where Mike really had lost control of me. He basically was in a spot where there was an obstreperous fella that was making trouble, and the committee didn't get behind him. So it was pretty clear at that point that they still thought that Mike owned the committee. And we ended up getting together on a weekday and basically getting everybody together and telling them that they needed to decide whether they were going to get behind Mike and take ownership of the thing or not. And the good news is that they did. So one of the good things that came out of that is we ended up with a group of people that ended up feeling it was theirs rather than it was Mike's. When it was Mike's committee, well, it was easy for them to just get angry. I mean, you know, they get plenty of things to not like, and maybe Mike was another one of them, and so that's not their committee, it's his committee. But when it became their committee, really interesting things began to happen. One of the good things about, and one of the good things here is that the diggers began to get involved in working with the public to get them interested in what was going on. So that was a good thing. I got another story to tell about that. We have one of the diggers is a Vietnam veteran, really smart guy, reads a lot, interesting man. And we were at a meeting where we were discussing how it was that the committee periodically gets together on weekends and catches as many green crabs as they can and just murders them. I'll be blunt about it. It isn't pretty. And this guy
listening to this for a while, basically said, well, you know, and I'm just saying right now, is the committee the way it started out, Mike said, you didn't have, no one had the freedom to just come up and disagree. It just was not a comfortable place. But once it became a comfortable place, then a good thing that could happen is, for instance, this guy says, well, you know, if you kill all the males, you're going to end up with more crabs in the future. Say what? And he said, no. He says the males are big. They kill all the other crabs too. They're cannibals. So you don't want to kill the males. And so I thought that's interesting. And you know, because we had turned into a committee where everybody sort of felt like they're on the same team, nobody told him that he was a fool, but they still wanted to kill crabs. About 2 days later, I ran across a journal article that said exactly what this guy was saying, which is that you actually end up making the problem worse if you remove all of the large crabs, because the large crabs turn out to be substantial predators of small crabs. So next meeting we got together and patted this guy on the back and announced that this is it. And so now you don't kill males, you only kill females. So science in action. And what was neat is that it didn't come from me or anybody else. It came from the committee, and it was okay. So that's good. Mike just told you a little bit about what's difficult about shared ownership. So the other bad thing about it is this thing that he was telling you, which is that when the committee is in charge, the committee can end up making some decisions where you're sitting there and you're going, oh, no. And that's what happened with the case of their not harvesting the clams and just letting them in for spat. So that's an interesting case. Mike started talking about the rewriting of history. I'm going to go with that one for a minute. I didn't even know what picture to put with this one, but I'll just say what Mike said is that for some reason, after having had this bad event where all of their work raising clams was gone, the clams all got eaten because they didn't harvest. And that was their decision that they made. And now we get this thing where, like I said, every few meetings, that whole event will come up, and there'll be this whole new history. The whole new history is, you know, that just proves that there's absolutely no reason to put nets over clams. It just doesn't work. I mean, do you remember that time we had net and all the clams are gone? Okay, I'm going to stop again. Thoughts? What? They didn't want to admit they're wrong? That's a pretty good guess. Yeah, that's probably it. Anyone else think of something else that's going on there? I got a guess too. I know how bad. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please, go ahead. So say that louder so I can hear it, and I'll repeat it for everybody. So it's kind of a fallback thing. We tried it, it doesn't work. We knew it wasn't going to work. Okay. Any other guesses? Yeah. Okay, that's a really interesting one. So what this fellow is saying is they're not actually, tell me if I'm not getting this wrong, correct me, but they're not actually breaking the process apart carefully enough. They know that there were clams there and then they were gone, and they're not actually seeing themselves as agents within that sort of a thing, and they're not taking it apart. I also sort of wonder, I think a lot of these guys really don't like hauling nets off. I'm sort of wondering whether they just don't want to do it. I don't know, that could be part of it too. I don't know. But anyway, here we get to what some of you guys do. So how many of you want to be scientists or work in science? Okay, for some, that's good. So this part, we're going to say a lot about Heidi here. You see pictures of Heidi working with kids at Sumner. You see pictures of Heidi pouring samples of mud. You see Heidi washing deal boxes. Heidi is paid by the state of Maine, part of the Department of Marine Resources, as a field scientist. So she is assigned to the district from here, basically from Gouldsboro on to Lubec and Eastport. And so she actually works with it. Do you have any idea how many committees there are in that group? I'm going to guess 20, 15. So she works with all of the towns in that area that have harvesting regulations. Oh, sorry. So, so that's what Heidi does. But one of the great things that Heidi did in this case is, since she ends up going to all of the meetings, when this rewriting of history comes up, Heidi basically says, no, that's not what happened. And she pulls out her notebook. Scientist got a notebook. She pulls out her notebook and she kind of takes them through the whole conversation. You know, you guys decided to do this. So no, that's not what happened. What I think is really interesting there is now this role of scientist. Why is it, do you think, that they put up with that from a scientist? Yes? She's nice. She's really a nice person. She's written notes, so she's got a record. Yeah? What? She's got credibility. And one of the things that maybe we didn't say enough, she comes to all the meetings. So it isn't like she came in this one time. I mean, she's essentially a member of the committee, essentially. They all know her. She's there all of the time. So she's a part of the group. And she keeps notes. And the only one that does, pretty much, too. So I think that's pretty cool. Talk about some of the other things that she does, because I think it's really interesting to look at Heidi as a kind of scientist that enables communities to work.
I probably wear the phone out talking to Heidi. She does so many things to help municipalities. Just to give you a context of the state of Maine, there's 75 municipal shellfish ordinances in the state. And there's 3 area biologists, which she is one of. So I call her up. She's come and helped us do core samples. Like when we had that spot that I was telling you about with all the clams, she'll help me with paperwork, because being scientists, you must be sent paperwork and you go, what the heck do they want to know? So I've quizzed her on that several times. She's been very helpful. She's never not taken my call. She will come and meet me and give me a hand. She's helped us pull nets. She's helped us with the picture with the Beal boxes, take care of nursery trays. She worked with the students in the high school. She has developed credibility amongst the Harvester Committee by attending those meetings. They don't always agree with her, but as Bill said, she will pull out the facts. Now, the facts about that we should have harvested that area, she wrote her supervisor an email. She read the email to the committee in the meeting and said, I think these guys are making a mistake because they voted not to harvest them. And that cooled it down for a while, but we've still gone back to, it keeps coming up. So the abilities that Heidi brings to that table And when Heidi speaks, they listen. The only thing that I will say to that is, in the first case that Bill spoke about the scientist speaking, would have had a lot more credibility if it had been a person like Heidi.
So she's essentially an embedded scientist, and Abe, you probably know people like this too. It's basically folks who do science, but their science is as much directed at making things work within the communities. Very cool job, very cool job. So, oops. Oh, there we go. Okay. So one of the things that I think is, the committee really is, it's fun. It's a nice organization. It was not a nice organization. There were days before I showed up where the committee basically got into fights. So it wasn't a very productive deal. It is now, so that's great. And one of the things that's contributed to that is that as we worked with them about green crabs, we really began to be aware that we are losing shore access really fast. And it isn't a new thing. I mean, Gouldsboro basically had an explosion of subdivision development back in the 70s and 80s. And a whole lot of places that used to be just shore paths to the water became somebody's lawn or somebody's house. And so this isn't a new thing. But what happened there was that over 30, 40 years, the folks who live here in Gouldsboro become part of the community. And up until about 2 or 3 years ago, we really depended, I forgot a map here. So this is a map of, I'll get to how we got this map, but basically working with the committee, we ended up finding out all of the places that they felt were really important to them. Those are all the little red balloons. All of the blue stuff is harvestable territory. So that's stuff that in one season or another can be open to digging. And the access points are often a way to get to someplace else. So this big cove up here, Sarah. I'm back to the movie. Oh, I think I know how to fix that. Got it. So there's a big blue spot up there that's called Grand Cove. And depending upon where the wind's blowing and how cold it is, but many other things, you want to come in one point. So the access points are such strategic ways into a whole lot of space. However, you will notice that the little blue dots are the only places where the town owns property. So that's the only public access other than conserved areas. But most of the conserved areas, there's Cap Point up there, that's under the water, but most of them don't. You can't go to conserved areas because they're not on the water. There's some blue dots, and that's stuff that the town owns, but basically too steep or something like that. So what you've got is a situation where to get to the shore, you've got to go across somebody's property, period. That's how it works. And it mostly has worked because there's agreements. There are informal agreements that are developed. But COVID happened, real estate prices went up, it began to get hot other places, so people came to Maine. But as any of you know, we've seen real estate just go nuts here. We've had just a whole lot of turnover, and that turnover means that all of those agreements began to be at risk. So we basically began to work with the committee to, and that's Mike up there. The plan was, let's just get them to list all the points that they know. Well, that didn't work because they're all secret. They're all their private access points. And so the first thing was no, but we focused on the stuff that everybody knew out, and pretty soon they opened up, and we ended up having really getting a good list of stuff. And they took my wife Pauline and another volunteer, Vicki, out to places and showed them where they go and why they go there. We learned a lot that we wouldn't have been able to learn a few years ago. So this really opened stuff up we really were able to get to work. And I won't go into details, but we've actually had some real success. We've actually been able to retrieve places, been able to get other people to give access when we lost it. Really exciting stuff. And what that does, of course, is that changes the committee dynamic. Again, the arrangements there suddenly begin to change, which is a good thing. I'll just say at the end here, there's a picture down here. We get together a couple times a year, certainly once a year, have people come eat clams and just talk. And at this meeting, we actually met a couple that had just acquired some shoreline property. And again, this is an arrangements thing, but the arrangement has been that everybody that wants to give access on the shore makes their own deal with the clam harvesters. And, you know, I own property. I don't even know these people. How do I do that? And how do I make sure that everybody's got the same agreement? So one of the things we'll be doing this year is working on putting the town in the center of that so that people can essentially have a no-fee license agreement with the harvesters, so that this couple will be, hopefully that'll be a test case. Maine Coast Heritage Trust is working with this, but it'll be where you can, the arrangement, rather than being a whole bunch of different things, the arrangement can be, you go to the town, you say what it is that you want, when the times of day, and whatever you're okay with, where they to walk, and then the town enforces it, which ought to simplify things. So again, focus on arrangement. I want to wrap up quickly here. In addition to the disappearing shore access, we've had a little problem with disappearing shore here in Goulsville. This happened on June 9th, I think, in 2021. We just had 6 inches of rain in an hour, and it's a fairly small peninsula that is very steep, and the water runs off really fast. What's come out of this, and the point here is all of this grew out of the work that we were doing with shellfish. So shore access. The next thing that grew out of it was really looking at the shore altogether and really beginning to get the town involved in thinking about, okay, well, what's going to happen? So we were able to get some funds to put together a study, vulnerability assessment action plan for the town. It's just a set of recommendations. So then again, we did not set up something where we presented it in the room, everybody in the audience listening. First off, as somebody noted, they don't get involved. And another thing is that the same people always come to them. So it's just, we know the folks that are going to come to those talks. So this really opened up to that. We had about 3 hours in the school. People just came and went as they wanted. And we talked about the shore issues, but also about, we have a real problem with food insecurity developing in town. We have some serious issues because of the housing. Workforce housing is a hot issue, and the town's working on that. Broadband stinks a lot of places in town. We're working on that. So it really became a place to talk about all of those things and get them together. I'm proud of Goulsboro. Goulsboro has learned how to support this kind of thing without it getting to be little bits in pieces. It's a good place. But honestly, a lot of the work that came out of the work with shell fishermen has set sort of the tone of it. It's how we really got into the climate change. So this is coming out today. I actually sent it to the printer today. We're creating a 24-page beautiful booklet called Scuttlebutt, Useful Tips for Living in Our Working Waterfront Community. It just starts out explaining it and talking about how if you're living here, you have to be part of living on the water, and that requires responsibility as well as other things. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But again, as people move in, the key thing for us is to welcome them, so that we want them as part of this, so that they understand who we are, what this place is, and that they're part of it too. So we'll see. I want to close with this, partly because it's a good idea to thank people, but also because of all the organizations like the Island Institute, the Zoellick Institute, Manomet, Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. All these places hire scientists. And if
if you're a young person interested in science, you can do academic science for sure. But if it weren't for nonprofits and government like Heidi, we wouldn't be able to do what we do here in Wilkesboro. I mean, it is really depending upon all these other organizations to create a network that supports it. So just the thought that you know, being involved in science and science communication is pretty rich, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for it. So we promised that we'd ask you what you've done and what, surely some of you have been working on things like this. We'd like to hear, and maybe we can reflect together on it. Anyone have something that they want to begin with? Something that's not working, or that worked great, or was frustrating, or went real well? Okay, yeah. Abe, can I pick on you?
Thank you. So we're doing a community science project with the community of Otter Creek, who is interested in why the Otter Cove in the Otter Creek community on MDI has lost a lot of clams and biodiversity in that cove, and what the role of the causeway, which is a part of the Park Loop Road, was in that. And so that was a lot of discussing with the community, like what are the questions that we want to ask? What are the pieces of information? How do we want to go through that, kind of gathering that information? And so that's been kind of a similar kind of experience. And at one of our meetings, there was a wall of death sign outside, you know, referring to the causeway, which is fair, right? It cut off access to the cove, and we're restricting tidal. That road is restricting tidal access, but. And that project is ongoing, but it is definitely, you know, a conversation that's informed in two by past harms to the community. That, you know, nobody around was making those decisions, but we're all kind of living from that kind of broken trust, and so having to try to share information and rebuild that trust, like some of what you guys were saying.
Anyone else doing community work where you got something to share? Yep, yes. Okay.
So I work with the Schoodic Education Adventure Program that we have here, where we have middle school students come and do a residential field trip to learn about different aspects of environmental science. And it's kind of similar to this concept of community science. Every group that we have, I'm always amazed at the amount of knowledge they already have coming into our program. We've had a lot of schools come from like waterfront communities where their parents are lobstermen. They already know about the tides. They already know all of these things that relate to the ocean. Or maybe they come from really far north and they know a lot about farming and soil science and forestry. And I think just like giving these students the opportunity to be the teachers in this field trip gives them a lot of confidence, because I'm like, this information that you just know because of your everyday life is something that people study and like get paid to study every day. And they probably didn't realize that it was so important. So yeah, starting like community science young with like 11-year-olds has been going really well over at C. So yeah. Yeah.
It's not them sitting there, but suddenly they're talking too.
Kind of to branch off of Zoe's point with starting students off young with caring about science and learning to question a lot of the things going on in the world. I think that only once I grew up did I kind of notice a lot of opportunities that I think as a kid I would have appreciated. So I think that outreach to like schools is something that's super important and we can always have more of. Just because I feel like I keep being exposed to all of these opportunities that now I think, oh wow, I would have loved to do that when I was a kid too. So.
My name is Nick Noyes. I live in Franklin. It's a little bit farther away, but there's a group from the Friends of Taunton Bay that's doing a tremendous amount of water quality monitoring in the bay. And the latest initiative has been to move into 4 different streams that feed water to the bay. So they're actually finding that the Taunton Bay is very, very clean. A lot of parameters look very good. They've moved into the streams and they're starting to find some PFAS. That's the non-degradable chemicals that are finding their way into our environment. Now, the other thing that's really happening in our town, Franklin is working on our comprehensive plan, and it kind of pushes the issue, what should we be looking for, protecting, and the state does provide some tremendous resources, habitat maps, and if you're not familiar with those, they're available. They update these maps. They look at water, natural resources, co-occurrence maps, which combine all the factors of wildlife areas, protected areas, conserved areas. They look at where animals need to move in the wintering grounds for deer, where fish need to migrate if they're anadromous, how they have to migrate up into from the ocean back into the fresh water to spawn. So it's a great program, and the state really requires every town to go through this process on a decade by decade basis. If you hear about something, if you want to get involved with something that will really make a difference, latch on to those comprehensive plan meetings and attend and advocate for your own town.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm the Community Resilience Coordinator for the region, and I was really pleased to see that Goldsboro is getting involved with that, but we can offer technical assistance and access to funding to do the vulnerability planning, and it's really run by the towns about what the towns want, and they decide what they want to go after. But there are people out there to help access state and private funding to do that.
State money, and here in Goldsboro, at some point, we don't know when, but at some point, Korea Peninsula will become a little island. I mean, in the same sense that we're on an island right now. We're on an island, you crossed over it, you hardly knew it, but you know, it's Big Moose Island, and Korea will be looking at something like that too, where it's really, the Grand Marsh Bay will achieve its lifelong goal of actually reaching the Atlantic Ocean at some point. So it'll happen. Well, thank you so much. And I guess the closing thought a couple closing thoughts I'll just say. This is slow work. So one mistake that someone could make, certainly someone that wants to move in a hurry, would be that you can come into a community and tell them what to do and they'll do it. I repeat, this is Maine. It doesn't work that way. I'm impressed as I work with Goldsboro at how much, although climate is sort of high on my list of things to worry about,
I'm very aware that, as I said, we've got food insecurity, we've got people that can't afford to live here. We have real problems with what is the future of the lobster industry. So there's a lot of things going on, and everybody's still trying to figure out how to make a living while they're doing all this. And to me, it is amazing that we can do good work and have good conversations when people have all that going on and are still trying to keep their heads above water. So I'm a big fan of communities, and I get pretty frustrated with people who think that a top-down thing is going to work. Won't work in Goldsboro, maybe somewhere else. Anyway, yeah. Huh? Oh, when did the committee get going? So there's a bunch of committees here. The Shellfish Committee has been around, yeah, maybe forever. Probably somewhere in the 70s, I think, was when the state actually began to formalize the idea of some of it is local control. The state is in charge of the public health, so they're worried about shellfish having poison and making you sick. But the state, Maine past the 60s, 70s, basically became a local control state. So certain things are given to the communities. Shellfish is one of them. Elder harvesting, I think, is another. Alewives. Anyway, so long time. And as Mike said, for a town to manage it, you got to have a committee. So it's been around a while. I think it's become more functional because all of a sudden they've got a problem to solve. It used to be that just everyone out and dug clams and life was good. The other committee that Tanya, right? Yeah, that Tanya referenced is we are starting in Gouldsboro a coastal resilience committee, and that'll be working on some of these. Korea Harbor, if Hurricane Lee had actually come a little bit further east, we would have had some serious problems in Korea Harbor. So it's really beginning to try to get ahead of those sorts of things. That committee is just getting going. Thanks.